مساء الخير جميعا. شكرا جزيلا لحضوركم الليلة سواء معنا شخصيا أو عن طريق اليوتيوب. بسبب الأوضاع حاليا بنعرف كتير عدد ما قدروا يجوا الليلة لأنه الأوضاع والكوفيد، فبنعرف أنه عدد كبير على اليوتيوب. شكرا جميعا لحضوركم. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Mr. Steve Sosebee. He is the founder and president of the Palestine Children's Relief Foundation, who I had the pleasure to meet almost 2 years ago. Mr. Steve was with us on a cycling trip, and we were a group of 50 people, all cycling for a cause. We were cycling to raise funds for a charity to help children with medical needs. I still remember the night before last when Mr. Steve stood up and he started telling us about his story and his connection to Palestine. It was very touching, it was humbling, and it was incredible to see that one person with such conviction, what he can accomplish. I will leave you to hear Mr. Steve's story and his journey for the past 24 years. Thank you very much. Mr. Steve, please go ahead.
Masal khair. Thank you, Lena. Thank you for coming out. I want to give a special thanks to Esmeralda and Zakaria and your group for organizing tonight and preparing it. To the Sheikh Ibrahim Cultural Center for inviting me and the board of directors. Thank you for coming out. And also to Sheikh Ameh bin Khalifa for hosting and providing us this venue. I'm going to, and first of all of you for coming out, and people who are watching, please be safe. These are difficult times, and I hope all of you are safe and secure during this COVID period. So, as Lena mentioned, I have a story that she mentioned, maybe she was a little bit surprised, and I get this a lot wherever I go, that the connection that you see an American guy who's dedicated his life to the Palestinian people and to the Palestinian cause as being unusual. But to be honest with you, it doesn't feel unusual to me, and I think I'm going to come back to this point a few times tonight, which is that the Palestinian issue is not just a cause for the Palestinian people, although certainly it is one for them to support and to give full effort towards. It's not just one for the Arab community, although it is one that should resonate with all Arabs as an important issue that needs their attention and support. But most importantly, the Palestinian struggle, the Palestinian issue is a human cause. Before we break it down into nationalities or ethnicities, it's a cause that every human being on this planet should support and believe in, because the struggle for freedom and equality and liberty for the Palestinian people is one that all of us as human beings should work and support in a positive way. And I was a young man growing up in a small town in Ohio when I was always searching for the truth behind issues. And there were lots of issues when I was growing up in the 1980s, issues and causes which were important to a lot of people. The freedom for blacks in South Africa when I was young was an issue that was very important. And lots of other struggles were going on in the world, but I always tried to understand the Palestinian struggle, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, from an objective and from a human perspective. Why was there a conflict in the Middle East? Why did it keep going on? And why was the Palestinian issue such an important one all over the world? And so I read a lot of books and I studied the issue, and I understood from kind of a historical perspective the root cause of this conflict and the struggle that the Palestinians have had to endure, losing their homeland, losing their rights, and not being as a free nation like so many other countries in the world, like I was raised in the United States. So I came to that conclusion and came to that understanding and tried to, at the university, I was an activist, and I believed always in speaking on behalf of people who were oppressed and people who were looking for the same freedom that I was born with in my country. You know, I didn't have to struggle for the rights of liberty. I didn't have to struggle for the freedom that I was born with. But that freedom that I was born into in the United States comes with the responsibility of standing for and with those who are not free. And instead of thinking forward for myself, I wanted to look back and help pull forward those who are struggling for freedom. And the Palestinian people is an issue that just came to me in my heart. It's just something that resonated very deeply with me. I had the chance to go to Palestine in 1988, the first year of the first Intifada. I was a college student, and I went with a group of students, and I got to see firsthand what was happening on the ground in Palestine. I lived with Palestinian families. I'd never traveled to the Middle East before. I'd never met many Arabs in my life before. My understanding of Palestine was what I read in the history books and what I saw on TV, and it wasn't always favorable. The images of what was happening in Palestine was scary. It was an uprising, it was a lot of conflict, there was a lot of tension, and there weren't many scenes that resonated on a human level. But when I went to Palestine and spent 3 weeks in the winter of 1988 as a college student, I got to tour around the West Bank and Gaza. I got to see firsthand what was happening on the ground in Palestine. I got to see and stay with the families, Palestinian families. I got to hear their stories. I saw the different aspects of life in Palestine. And I went back to Ohio to finish my education. And it was a life-changing experience. You can imagine 3 weeks in the West Bank and Gaza during that historical time in Palestine when, for the first time in the history of the Palestinian people, they were rising up themselves to liberate themselves. They weren't waiting for someone else to do it, and they were doing it collectively. It was a struggle of everyone, Christians and Muslims, poor and rich people, educated and falahin, the people from small villages. They were all unified for one single purpose, which was freedom. A simple human concept that all of us should believe in and all of us should work for. So I left Palestine after 3 weeks of visiting the refugee camps and the villages and the towns and hearing stories and seeing the hardship of life. And I went back to the States, and I remember 2 important lessons that I learned and 2 important impressions that I walked away with from my trip to Palestine, what I experienced and what I saw. The first one was how hard and brutal and oppressive the system of occupation was for the Palestinian people, how difficult it was for them to go from one town to another, or to educate their children, or to earn an income, or to live, and to read their books and carry their flag and speak with pride about their country and their heritage. They were oppressed. They were not free to do so. How difficult and hard life in Palestine was. I walked away with that was my first impression. And my second impression was even more important, which was how much humanity and kindness and compassion the Palestinian people had, how much courage they had. They were rising up against one of the world's greatest militaries for their freedom with nothing. They had rocks, they had their dignity, they had courage, they had unity. And that's what I walked away with. Their humanity is what changed my life more than anything. And I felt when you see something like that, when you experience that firsthand, when people open their lives to you and open their homes to you, and they show you how hard their lives are, what the injustice of their everyday existence means for them, you have a responsibility to not just learn and walk away and go back to your life and go back to living as a normal person, as any normal American does. You have a responsibility to carry their stories on to others and to educate others and to share that information with others, especially in the United States, especially where I'm from, my country. Why? Because my country is involved in this issue from a political point of view, from an economic point of view. We were on and are on the wrong side when it comes to the freedom and those basic values of justice and equality that I was raised with in my country. So my neighbors and my friends and my relatives and my countrymen needed to understand the things that I had seen firsthand on the ground in Palestine. And that's what I walked away with. And they needed to understand that the Palestinian people, these people who've been dehumanized for their whole lives, that in the media were shown as being subhuman, not equal to us, a different culture, different mentality. They weren't that at all, to rehumanize them. So I finished my university. I had my degree in international relations, and I went back to Palestine to work as a freelance writer. And my goal then was to share. I didn't want to be a writer as a career, as a journalist. I wanted to use writing, because it was something that I was good at. I wanted to use writing as a way to share the stories of the Palestinian people, everyday stories, not the big stories of negotiations between this country and that country, or this political party and that political party, but the stories of people I met every day in the streets, The children who couldn't go to school, the farmers who couldn't have access to their land, the workers who were denied access to making a living, the writers whose books were banned. I wanted to share those stories with my fellow Americans so they understood, at least they understood. You can choose what side you're on, but you have to know the truth. And the first step of what I felt my responsibility was to help share the truth of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian struggle with the American people. So I went back, and that was my objective, that was my cause. So in the winter of 1989 and early 1990, I was going around the West Bank and writing stories and sharing stories. And in the course of my work there, I heard about this boy from Hebron, from the West Bank town, who had lost his legs from an explosion, lost his hand, lost an eye. He was just 10 years old, and this was an unusual incident. Usually Palestinian children, and hundreds of them had been injured and killed already during the first year of the Intifada. Usually the injuries were gunshot injuries. It was very rare for a child to be injured by a hand grenade, but this boy was. And I went to visit him and to do a story as a journalist, to share his story. I went to visit him in Maqasid Hospital on the Mount of Olives, Jebel Zaytun, in East Jerusalem. And I found this beautiful boy in the hospital, this amazing child with such a gleam in his eye and so full of so much life and energy. And yet he was in a wheelchair without legs, and he was missing a hand and missing an eye. And just as my first trip to Palestine changed my life, by visiting people and hearing their everyday stories, my encounter with this boy changed my life as well. And I'll show you why. When I first met him, I had a camera with him. I took a picture of him. This was in 1990. And this is the picture I took with my camera. This is Mansur Abusini. This was the first trip I took to the hospital to do a story about him. And you can see how terribly injured he is. This is a triple amputee. You have 4 limbs. He had 3 of them blown off by a bomb. And yet, despite that, his one limb carries the symbol of peace and victory for the Palestinians, the V sign. And you can see his pride in his face and in his eyes, despite his terrible injuries. And this, to me, symbolizes, this boy symbolized for me then, this photo symbolizes for me today, the Palestinian struggle, the Palestinian people. They've had their limbs dismembered. They've been permanently maimed by losing their homeland, and yet they've kept their humanity and their courage and their dignity. And that's what this boy represents, and that's what the Palestinian people represent for me. So this is the photograph I took, and at that time I was working, I wasn't making a living as a journalist. There was before the internet. Opportunities to share your work at that time were relatively limited, but I was trying. I was young. I was just starting my life. I would go back to the U.S., go back to Ohio and work during the seasons as a laborer, and then save my money and go work as a journalist in Palestine. So I went back in the spring of 1990 to the U.S. with this photograph. And I told myself, it's not enough. I'm not happy in my life. I'm not fulfilled in my life just writing about this boy's story. And I did. I wrote about it. It was in a couple magazines, nothing big. But just as I felt I had a responsibility when I visited Palestine the first time and I saw the stories of everyday people, I had that responsibility to share those stories with the American people. I felt when you meet a child like this whose whole life is now in a wheelchair, that this gleam in his eye is going to go away because tomorrow he's going to wake up and his legs are not going to be there. And after 1 year and 5 years and 10 years, this boy's life is going to be not full of the pride that he has now, but suffering, that you have a responsibility to do something. And I met this boy, I therefore had this responsibility to do something. So I took this photograph back and I showed it to some people I knew in my hometown, a small town in Ohio called Kent, and some Palestinian students I knew from the university, and I said, I met this boy in the West Bank and I want to do something for him. And somebody referred me to a Lebanese doctor in Akron, Ohio, showed him this photograph, and within a couple of days he called me on the phone and he said, hey, you know that boy you showed me a picture of? I arranged treatment for him. Bring him over. And I said, well, he has a sister who's also injured. Can you help her as well? He said, yes. He made a couple more calls. Bring him over. I had no idea what that meant. How do I go and bring 2 Palestinian children back for medical care? It was free, but I had no idea what that meant. To cut a long story short, I went back to Palestine. We raised some money. I got a ticket to go back and got him and his sister out and brought them over to Ohio in May of 1990. And they were the first 2 injured Palestinian kids to come to the U.S. And It was an amazing experience. It was something that every step along the way, I encountered a serious challenge that was overcome by somebody just coming forward and making a difference. I remember when I was leaving the country of Palestine, when I was leaving the West Bank for the first time, I'd always flown in through Lud Airport, through Ben Gurion Airport, Lud. And this time I was traveling through Jordan. So I'd never left by the bridge before. And when I got to the bridge, I found out you have to pay an exit tax. I didn't have a single dollar in my pocket for me and the 2 kids to leave. And I stood there thinking, we're stuck. We're never going to get out of here. I don't have any money. And suddenly out of nowhere, this man who saw me with these 2 injured children in wheelchairs, he saw me standing there looking relatively distraught, came forward and paid our exit tax. I didn't know who he was. He disappeared into the crowd, and it was just like you think these small incidents happen every step along the way in my life that have shown me that this decision to help kids, there are so many people along the way who make small and big contributions that make everything possible. I'd love to go and meet that man today if he's alive, God protect his soul, and just say, look, that small act of kindness that you did that one day at the bridge, leaving Palestine to Jordan, look what it's turned into. Not only for these kids, but you helped start a whole entire organization that's resulted in thousands of children having treatment. So it's these small little gestures of kindness that make such an impact in life. And I think that's an important lesson we can always remember. No matter how small you feel your contribution is to help somebody, you have no idea how big of an impact that ultimately makes. So this boy and his sister came to the U.S., and immediately they were on the front page of the newspapers. Immediately there was a press conference. And this did something that changed, that showed me, this is what I wanted to do as a journalist, right? So I wanted to share these stories of the Palestinian people to humanize them. Because for so long in the American media, the Palestinians are not treated as human beings. They don't deserve the same rights, the same liberties, the same freedoms that we enjoy. Why? Because they're not equal to us. They have a different culture. They have a different mentality. They're not people who have our values. And that's not true, of course. They're human beings. And we're all equal. So immediately they were on the front page of the newspaper where I'm from. It's not a small area. And it was for the first time Americans were seeing Palestinian kids and seeing Palestinian people from a human perspective. And that's what I wanted to accomplish as a journalist. And in addition to that, it organized the Palestinian and Arab community where I'm from in Northeast Ohio to come forward and care for these kids. They weren't here with their parents. Mansur and his sister, Sabah, were away from their families. I brought them by themselves. They were there for several months. They didn't speak English. I didn't speak Arabic. It was a miracle, when I look back at it, even that I was able to get them out. And then we were able to get as far as we got. Well, once I got to the U.S., the entire Arab community came forward and helped take care of them. And that's something I wanted to do. I wanted to organize. I was an activist at my university. I wanted to organize our community to be involved in a positive way. You know, demonstrations are one thing. Politics is one thing. This is a non-political act. These are helping kids. But by organizing the Arab community, by organizing the Palestinians, they got involved. They were no longer frustrated watching their people on the ground in Palestine with their intifada rise up and resist occupation and do nothing about it. They now were involved. They were helping to heal the wounds of children from the Middle East. So that's what I wanted to accomplish as a journalist. I was accomplishing it by bringing these kids here, even more effective. They were on the front page of the newspaper. They were on television news. So Zachariah, if you could play this video, I'll show you. This was a story that was on the local news that when they arrived.
To try to help give the two a chance at a more normal life.
13-year-old Mansur Abusini was your typical young boy living on the West Bank of Palestine until November of last year, when an Israeli soldier, for some reason, threw a grenade at a porch where he and his family were eating. Mansur lost both his legs and his hand. His 14-year-old sister Sabah suffered severe burns. Both of them were hospitalized when Steve Sosebee of Kent, a freelance writer, met them in an East Jerusalem hospital.
Once I met Mansur, met the type of individual that he is, and became friends with him, I felt it was my duty to try to help him as his friend.
Help he did. Sosebee embarked on a campaign to bring Mansur and Sabah back home after getting doctors across the area to donate their time.
That was actually there were several stories like that on the local news, and you can see, I don't think those guys knew what they were doing. Honestly, Palestine, West Bank, they were using the word Palestine much freer than they probably knew they could get away with back then. But that was great because for the first time Americans are watching TV and seeing injured Palestinian children, and there's no justification for kids like that being injured and suffering. So these kids went back to Palestine better. They went back walking. A couple of months, Mansur and his sister Sosebee took them back home. And I said, Halas, I did my duty. These kids got treatment. I feel better about myself from a spiritual point of view. We're all looking for ways to do something good in our lives. I did something good in my life. I got these kids treatment they otherwise couldn't get. Halas. But then when they came back to Palestine, people heard about these two Palestinian kids who went to America and started bringing me other children who needed treatment. They had a neighbor, they had a cousin, they heard about this child who was injured or who needed some kind of medical care they couldn't get locally. Can you help them? People would come to me and ask me that. And why not? I wanted to do something to serve the Palestinian cause in a positive way. I wanted to do something to serve the Palestinian people, to show them I love them, and I stood by them, and I had solidarity with their cause. In a positive way, in a healing way, not in a destructive way, not in a hateful way, but in a way that showed them compassion and kindness, and more importantly, healed the wounds of children. So I started sending kids to the U.S. for free. I found hospitals all over the country that would take these children. And then I started an organization because at that time, I was just a 24-year-old American guy. I couldn't figure out how to do it over and over and over again. There were plane tickets, there was visa fees, there were things that cost money. So we started a nonprofit organization called the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. This was in 1991 and 1992. And we registered with the U.S. government. We got tax exemption. We became a legal entity. And we started bringing injured Palestinian kids over. And you can see we started getting stories in the newspaper, getting them over for treatment. And it just became something that really became a much bigger program. Every few months we would get new injured kids in to different hospitals and get the communities to be involved and get them in the media and most importantly heal these children's bodies for free. Didn't cost anything other than basic transportation fees for these kids. I was very proud of that. And during the course of that work, when I just started the organization, I was in Jerusalem one day, and a woman came to me who was a social worker who was treating injured Palestinian, or working with injured Palestinian kids in the West Bank. And we just met. She wanted to help me to help some of her children who needed help. And we fell in love. And we started a life together. And for 17 years, we built the organization together. She was a Palestinian from the West Bank. I'm an American guy from Ohio. Our worlds couldn't be any more different than they were, and yet we had that common human bond. We had that common human connection that people have in life. Just as I had with Mansur when I first met him. I was a young American guy, he was a Palestinian child, but there was a human connection. And that's the most important connection we have. Our connections are not based on religion or on language or on identity. Sometimes there's a spiritual connection. And that's what I had with my wife, Huda al-Masri, when we met. And that's together we built the organization and just started really working hard to bring kids over, get them treatment. She would take care of the kids and their language and the culture and the hardship of them adapting to the United States and the difficulty of adjusting to medical care and them staying with host families. And I would run the organization, raise the funds or arrange the medical treatment. So we were a team. And in the course of that 17-year marriage, the organization really grew and took off and developed into an institution. And we brought in more people. And we started doing more work, sending teams of doctors there and taking on bigger projects and programs as the organization grew. And I was very proud of that. We had 2 children. We were happy in life. Happy in our work because we were doing something good for Palestine, something good for people, something on a humanitarian level, and happy on a personal life. We were a very happy family. We had 2 small daughters, and having this life experience in which you were doing something that gave you meaning and purpose. But there's always, we all know this, everybody is old enough to probably realize that when you go through life long enough, things don't happen the way you plan them. It's always a bad idea to kind of plan your life and expect things to happen the way they are. It was on Christmas Day of 2008 when my wife and I were in Dubai with 6 kids who were injured, and we were working with Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Charity Foundation, which were helping us bring kids to the Emirates for treatment. And my wife was sick. She had been sick for like a month, not feeling well. And I told her, just go get a blood test, see what it says. Maybe you have some kind of viral infection that we can get antibiotics for. She went and got a blood test and came back. And I could just tell with the look on her face when she came to me. I was with my daughters, my 2 young daughters, kind of waiting across the street. And she came and said, they told me I have leukemia. And I actually didn't know what leukemia was at the time. And she did, and she was shocked. And then, we went immediately to the hospital, an American hospital in Dubai, and they did another blood test, and they said, yes, this is what you have. It's very serious. The next day, we flew back to the U.S., and over the course of the next 7 months, she took, a lot of different treatment, chemotherapy, bone marrow transfers. And actually at that time, that was in December of 2008, there was a huge attack going on in Gaza, in which hundreds and hundreds of people in Gaza were being killed and being injured. Thousands were being injured. And I remember we flew like 2 days after Christmas. We went directly to the hospital from the airplane. And my wife, even though she was starting to get drugs into her system, and within the next couple of weeks, her hair was falling out, and like everybody does when they go through this very difficult treatment. But she was every day on her computer working to help kids who were being injured in Gaza. She never gave up that part of her humanity and her dedication to her people and to this organization. And I always respected her for that. She was a young mother. We had a 2-year-old and we had a 12-year-old, and she knew she was very sick. She knew that the prospects of her beating this disease were not that great, yet she continued to give from herself to others, strangers, children she didn't know. And I always look back at that and think about how courageous she was, because I don't have that courage. If I was facing my end of life and I was a young father, or even today, I don't know how much I could give to others. And yet my wife did every single day when Gaza was being bombed in January of 2009. Well, we were a happy family, as I said. You can see my wife here, Huda al-Masri, and my 2 young daughters, Dima and Jenna. And that was only a few months before she got sick. But in July of 2009, my wife passed away from cancer. She fought, as hard as she possibly could as a Arab mother, as a Palestinian, who are very good fighters in the sense of survival. She fought. But, cancer is one of those diseases that no matter how hard you fight, sometimes it's not enough. So this was my wife near the end of her life, and you can see how hard it was on her body. She was, a very, very dignified, beautiful woman, and yet this disease really ravaged her and destroyed her, as it often does to people. And, I made a decision that after my wife passed away, we actually talked, and I promised her that I would continue my work, and I would continue to raise my children with the Palestinian identity. Both my daughters spoke Arabic. They lived in Palestine. They carried Palestinian passports. So I promised her I wouldn't lose that connection, even though I'm not Palestinian. That was important for her, because she was a proud Palestinian. She always wanted to raise our kids as Palestinians. So I promised her that, and I moved back to Palestine shortly after my wife passed away, and with my daughters, and put them in school there and made sure they got their education and language and identity. The American identity is easy because you're constantly, influenced by media and the whole world around you. But the Palestinian identity is for my kids, as an American, I had to raise them there because I couldn't give it to them outside. So and it was important for me that they kept that identity. So we moved back to Palestine, and I wanted to honor my wife. I wanted to honor her legacy as a humanitarian, as a proud nationalist Palestinian Arab woman. And I also wanted to do something for the Palestinian health sector. The organization was becoming bigger. It wasn't just bringing missions in and sending kids out. We could do more. And I also realized at that time, if my wife had been She was born and raised in Palestine. If I hadn't met her, she would have still gotten leukemia. It wasn't related to where she lived. It wasn't related to our life at all. It was something that she was going to get on Christmas Day of 2008, regardless of whether I was in her life or not. So had I never met her, she would have been suffering from cancer inside Palestine. And I realized there's no treatment available for children with cancer in Palestine. Not in the West Bank. There's an excellent center at Augusta Victoria Hospital in East Jerusalem, but not all Palestinians have access to it. There's a military occupation. That occupation doesn't give people the freedom to move from the West Bank to Jerusalem. You need a permit. So sick kids often don't get that access as they should. So the way that I honor my wife is that we opened a cancer hospital. We did a fundraising program. We started raising money. We want to build a cancer hospital for the Palestinians that's public, meaning it's free for the families, that they can get treatment in their own hospitals by their own doctors, for their own children. They don't have to go outside of the country or suffer from the lack of permits or be denied treatment and let their kids suffer and die like my wife died. We decided to build a cancer hospital for them. So in April of 2013, we opened Palestine's first public pediatric cancer department in Beit Jala Hospital in Bethlehem, in my wife's name, the Huda al-Masri Pediatric Cancer Department. And over the past 8 years, it's been open and treated hundreds of children for free, saved the lives of hundreds of children who otherwise wouldn't have access to the care that they get now. And most importantly for me, it honored my wife's legacy. Huda deserved that kind of lasting legacy because she was somebody who gave her life to this organization and to this cause. So I was very honored. It's the biggest highlight of my professional career, was to do something to honor my late wife and to fill a gap in the Palestinian health sector. I then realized we can have a bigger impact. We don't have to just put a Band-Aid on the Palestinian suffering by taking doctors there and treating kids. That's important. You can do that, and you should do it, but a bigger impact is developing solutions within the health sector, where there's defects, where there's deficits in the health sector, and there's plenty of them. There's deficits in all sectors of the Palestinian society, in education, in the economy, in the society, and in the health sector. Well, I'm involved in the health sector for children. So that's where we started addressing. And the first one we really took on was pediatric cancer in the West Bank. Now we solved it. We keep a social worker in that department. If you ever come to the West Bank, some of you have that opportunity, come and visit the department. We'd love to have you there. The kids would love to have you. So the organization, let me go back a little bit. When I moved back to Palestine, when we were building this department and raising money for it, and I thank all of the people in the world, it was an effort by hundreds and thousands of people worldwide who gave $5 or $5,000 or $50,000 or whatever the amount. It was a group effort. It wasn't one person. It wasn't one company. It wasn't one government. It was the power of the people. And I hope that that is also a symbol or a lesson for all of us, that we can make a difference, that we don't have to depend on others to do what we can do when we collectively unify, when we come together for a noble, correct cause or purpose or project or program. And that's what we showed by doing this Huda al-Masri Cancer Department in Bethlehem. So this is where our children now get treatment who have cancer, the same disease that took my wife's life. And what we also expanded was bringing in medical teams. So before the COVID virus, we were bringing in we brought in 175 foreign volunteer teams of hundreds of doctors from all over the world who give their time as surgeons, as physicians, as volunteers away from their hospitals in New Zealand, Japan, Australia, France, Italy, the US, Chile, Canada, all over the world. They come to Palestine. And many of them, most of them are not Arabs. Most of them have no connection to this issue at all. Other than like me, they're human beings. Other than me, they feel that this is a human issue, that the Palestinian issue or the Syrian issue or whatever issues are going on in the world that affect the lives of children, we as human beings have to take a stand. And we have to stand by the solution. And the solution for these doctors is to go give their skills, give their expertise, give their time, and save the lives of our children. And that's what we see with our doctors here. So these are actually heroes. These men and women leave their hospitals, leave their families, leave the comfort of their life. I mean, so some of you have been to some of these countries like France and Italy. There's amazing countries. You want to go to those countries, not leave them. And these gentlemen and these ladies and these physicians come and give their time in Gaza during the bombings and give their time in Lebanese refugee camps or wherever to make life better for our children. So these are true heroes, and they should inspire you, no matter what your nationality is, but especially if you're Palestinian or Arab, that this cause is a human cause. Again, it's not one that you should be alone or feel alone. It's one that you should feel you have brothers and sisters who stand by you, like me, like them. And it might not translate into the global world policy where governments show that they stand with this basic human value of freedom and equality and justice that the Palestinians lack and have been struggling for generations. It may not translate into governments, but it's in the human connections. You can see it in our doctors. You can see it in myself. So these doctors come and treat thousands of kids every year, train local doctors. So we're very proud to be the main organization in the world sending volunteer doctors into Palestine. And honestly, I've never had a doctor say, I'm not coming back again. They always come back for two reasons. The one I've already mentioned, they love the Palestinian and Arab people. They love the Middle East. They love this cause. And because, as I mentioned, when I first went to Palestine, how it changed my life, every one of them has that same experience. The humanity and courage and dignity of the Palestinian people resonates with them and changes them like it changed me. And number two, they trust PCRF. We're a very professional organization. We have a great staff on the ground, very dedicated, hardworking people who are courageous and work day and night to make our doctors comfortable and safe. And then the other thing we do is which I started and which we've done now over 2,000 times, which is find these kids free treatment outside. There's hospitals all over the world that'll take these kids. All you need to do is be persistent and work hard and find them care. So that's what we've been doing. And just like you saw Mansur in the first photograph, you see this Muhammad also from Gaza. You know, these children, these are lifelong injuries. You can get him a leg, we did. You can get him walking again, he's walking again. But every morning when he wakes up, he has to put that leg on. And every night when he goes to bed, he takes his leg off. That's a permanent injury. We can only make his life only so much better. But what we can do is show him that we care and that we love him and that we stand by him and that we're willing to give whatever we can to make his life better. And we do that for all of our kids. And we help any child, no matter what their religion, no matter what their nationality. We help Syrian kids, we help Iraqi kids, we help Lebanese, Jordanian, Palestinians, Christian, Muslims. It doesn't matter for us. We don't ask. It's not important. The important thing is to change people's lives in a positive and effective way. And this is a boy, Abdullah, who actually I'll tell you his story because this just shows you, that God works in amazing ways. And I told you earlier, there's always points along the way where you face a challenge and then there's a solution, and there's so many stories. I only mentioned one to you about being at the bridge and like, how am I going to get out of here? And someone just emerged out of a crowd of faces. Well, this boy was actually, if you look at his right leg here, this thing might have a pointer on it, but if you look at his right leg sitting down, that's an artificial leg. So when he was young, he had cancer. He was like 2-3 years old, and he was treated. He had bone cancer, and as they often do with bone cancer, they had amputated his right leg. So if you look at that, you can see it sticking out of the pants there. So we had brought him to the U.S. to get a new leg. And during the course of his stay in the U.S., he went into heart failure, not related to what we brought him for treatment for. And he, because the chemotherapy when he was young put such damage on his heart, by the time he was 15 years old, he just happened to be in Philadelphia at the time, and he went into heart failure, and he needed a heart transplant. Well, heart transplant, we arrange treatment for free, but we can't arrange that treatment for free. That's like $1 million service. Hospitals, you're talking months in a hospital. You're talking an operation of finding somebody who can donate a heart. We're not talking about a prosthetic leg. But by the mercy of God, we were able to get him insurance in the States, which is extremely difficult. We didn't have to pay a penny. We flew him by helicopter to a hospital in Pittsburgh that would take him. And he sat waiting until within 2 or 3 days of him waiting for a new heart, because you don't know when you're going to get one. A young man around his age was killed in a car accident, and they were able to save his heart, fly it in, and he had a heart transplant. Didn't cost us anything. And I visited him in the West Bank a couple weeks ago, and he's doing great. He's going to school, he's happy, he's healthy. And that's just one example. It's just one story. Every one of our kids, every one of the thousands of kids that we've treated, either by sending them outside for treatment or bringing doctors in to treat them, has a story. Maybe not as dramatic as his, or as lucky as he was to be in the U.S. when he went into heart failure, because if he was in Palestine, he would have died. But he was lucky to be in the U.S. Not all of them have that dramatic of a story, but every one of them has a story. Every one of them is a human being. Every one of them deserves our love and compassion and help. So sending kids out for treatment is what we do. Bringing doctors in for treatment is what we do. And some of the projects we're doing right now are really impactful. We've grown in the last 30 years. From when I first brought Mansur and his sister Sabah to the U.S. in May of 1990. That was 31 years ago in a couple of months. 31 years. And that organization that we started and we built over that period of time with my first wife, Huda al-Masri, God rest her soul. Now we're taking on bigger and bigger projects. And why not? We can. We should. We have to. These bigger projects are like the first cancer department. I mentioned plugging gaps in the health sector. And there's so many of them. You know, we bring teams over that can't operate sometimes because we don't have space in the intensive care unit. So what we're doing is we're building a new intensive care unit on the top of the hospital here in Ramallah. We're actually building 2 floors. The bottom one here with the windows out, that's the new intensive care unit. It's going to be a 14-bed pediatric intensive care unit, the only one in the West Bank dedicated for children. Those kids now who are very sick from car accidents, from diseases, from infections, from gunshot injuries, who need intensive care, will go to this department. They don't have to leave the health sector. They don't have to leave their country for this or die or suffer for treatment they should get. And that's a huge solution. It saves lives and it saves money. The top floor is a pediatric cardiology department. Hundreds of kids every year are born with heart defects. And for years we've been bringing in these doctors who treat these kids. They need a department for it. They need an organized structure to be able to run a strong response to and save lives of these children. So we're building these departments. And that's, again, from the donations of people like yourselves. It's not any one specific donor in the world who's making these departments possible, although there are people who are very generous, but it's a collective effort of our chapters, of our volunteers, of our donors all over the world, and we're very proud of that. So our organization has grown, and my responsibility in starting this organization and running this organization and today standing in front of you is hopefully to encourage you to support our work or just to be active. I mean, we all feel these days very frustrated by what we see going on in the world, whether it's politically, in my country, I'm American, or on the global level. We don't see that some of the reasons I first got involved in the Palestinian issue, nothing's changed. It's only gotten worse. There's less opportunities for the Palestinians to be free today than there was 31 years ago when I first started this organization. But that doesn't mean we give up. That doesn't mean we don't realize that we can make a difference in this world. It doesn't mean that we don't stand and act. Yes, things are not going to change today or tomorrow or next week or next year when it comes to the basic core issue of freedom and equality in Palestine, but we can save lives of children there. We can show love and compassion and healing and solidarity with the people there and let them know that the lives of their children matter and that they're not forgotten and we haven't abandoned them. And we can do it in a way which isn't political. We do it in a way that heals their lives, that fixes structural problems in the health sector, that makes a fundamental change in Palestine or in the region. And we do that with pride and with solidarity, putting aside whatever differences we have for one basic goal, which is to heal the lives and the bodies of our children in Palestine. Well, I'm a very fortunate man in my life. I've since remarried to an amazing, wonderful woman. She happens to be a doctor. And actually, it's funny how life is very linear. You know, you're born, and if you're lucky, you live a long life, and you can one day look back with pride on your accomplishments, your children. You've been a good life. You've had a good life. So it's very linear, but it's also a circle. And my new wife, is a doctor who treats kids with cancer. And she's already spent weeks and months working in the same department named after my first wife, as a doctor, healing children with cancer. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm very proud of that. Imagine, my second wife, who's a doctor who treats kids with cancer, works in the department named after my first wife. I'm very proud of that. I love her very much, Dr. Zina Salman. She's a great woman, a great humanitarian. So I'm very blessed in my life. And I want to continue my giving back and sharing my blessings with the Palestinian people, with the Arab children, not just Palestinian, but Arab children. And I'm very proud of this organization, and I thank everybody who's made it possible. This is by no stretch in any way a reflection of me. It's a reflection of thousands of people all over the world, like Lena and Dr. Ali, who've been active in supporting us and raising money and being involved. And I encourage everybody to do whatever you can in any way you can to be involved and to help. And don't be frustrated and don't be discouraged by how difficult this task is or how hard the world looks today. It's always been hard. It's always going to be hard. But we can make a difference. We can make a change. And if I symbolize anything to any of you, I hope I symbolize the ability for individuals to make a change in this world. So thank you guys. Thank you everybody watching on YouTube. And thank you guys for coming here tonight. Much respect to the people of Bahrain for inviting me, the Sheikh Ibrahim Cultural Center, Sheikh Amai, everybody for giving me this opportunity to present my story, the work of the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. If you would like to donate, if you'd like to help us, if you'd like to support our work, go to our website, PCRF.net, not com, .net. You can find all of the information you need about our work, our history, the way you can help, the way you can be involved. Share our organization with others, network, get involved, be active, and let's just keep going. We're not going to give up. We have a responsibility. We have an obligation to do something for others. And there's no better place, there's no more just cause in this world today than serving the Palestinian people. And I'm very honored and privileged to be someone who can do that. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Did you want to, any questions? I'm not sure how this goes next. Faddal. I'll give you this one so it's not. Is there any questions? I'm happy to answer any questions. You're welcome.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
The last few years, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing?
That's a good question. So, I mean, we face a lot of challenges in the as an organization, which is, you know, as we've grown as an organization, we've taken on bigger projects. So if you would ask me this question 2 years ago, we built and opened a new cancer department in Gaza. So the biggest challenge we had at that time was just getting the equipment and materials in to complete the project. Because I guess I should have mentioned that in my presentation, a lot of the kids that we would have been treating in our department in Bethlehem couldn't get out of Gaza. Gaza itself has been described by the United Nations, not just by me, but by the United Nations, as the world's largest open-air prison. So getting kids out for treatment has always been a challenge. So we built a cancer department in Gaza. We couldn't get materials in. We couldn't get basic stuff, cement, equipment. So that was a challenge then, but that's now completed, thank God, alhamdulillah. So what's our challenges now? Our challenges now is that we have so many areas where we can really have an effective intervention. We have small projects on the local area, clinics in Tulkarm. We're building a intensive care unit and operating theater in Badawi refugee camp, Safad Hospital there. We need money. I mean, honestly, to equip that hospital in Safad Hospital in Badawi refugee camp, $1.2 million. That's hard to raise that kind of money. We could, if we had that money, we could buy that equipment and have that hospital equipped and treating patients within a month or two. And those lives would be saved, and those children would be treated, and those people there, refugees, Palestinian and Syrian, would have access to the care that they deserve. That's one of the many projects we're doing. So honestly, our challenges are not political challenges. Those exist. Those impact the environment where we work. Of course they do. But we've been dealing with those for 30 years. That's fine. We can manage that. We're not a political organization. We're a humanitarian organization. What we need are the resources to have the intervention and impact in all aspects. Hospitals in South Gaza have different needs than clinics and hospitals in Jenin. You know, projects in Hebron have different needs than refugees in South Lebanon or in Jordan. So in every area we're trying to identify the needs, what solutions we can provide, what are the immediate solutions related to COVID, related to the economic situation, and what are the long-term development sustainable projects that we can do that will alter the structure of the Palestinian health sector in a positive way. They're huge, they're immense. To do that, you have to have the resources. We're not that big of an organization yet, so we hope we have the resources to be able to grow and have a bigger impact.
Thank you, Steve. Very nice presentation and enlightening. My question to you now, once these buildings are built, these ICUs, these hospital floors, all the buildings you talk about, the hospital clinics, things like this, do you have staff to staff them? Do you have Palestinian doctors and nurses that will be able to work and help and staff these institutions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work within the public health sector, and it's not because we strongly believe that the public sector is the most efficient or most effective, but that's where the poor people go to get access to care. But and it's also where we then hand over the running costs of salaries, medication, utilities, infrastructure over to the government. But within that responsibility, we keep involved with training and with human resources, meaning that in places like the new intensive care unit we're opening up there, we've already started a training program from our international team of consultants. We have doctors, pediatric intensive care doctors and nurses in the US who've already been involved in virtual and remote training for nurses there. They've put together a training program, workshops, they've already started. And then once the borders open up again, they'll come over, as we have been for years, and do hands-on intensive training on the ground there. We don't just build and abandon, because then you see the standard of care collapse. So before we start a project like this, we go into an agreement with the Ministry of Health that they have certain responsibilities of staffing, of quality control, of keeping the departments running, and then we come in and continue to provide technical support and training for the doctors and nurses on the ground there. And we do that in all different areas. We have a medical advisory board of international specialists in pediatric cardiac surgery, in intensive care, in pediatric orthopedics, urology, plastic and reconstruction, all of the subspecialties that are involved in children's care. We already have for years put together a team of experts from all over the world who are involved not just in doing missions, but identifying those who can be trained and training them. We understand how important that is. So yes, we do that.
So, Steve, I would imagine that there's plenty of NGOs that are doing work either similar to yours or complementary. How do you make sure that all the aid that's coming in is being effectively organized and distributed on the needy cases?
Yeah, it's another good, you guys have, that's 3 for 3 on the questions tonight. Excellent job. I don't always get that ratio, by the way. So when I started PCRF, one of the reasons that I started is that nobody else was doing that work, that I wasn't duplicating the work of another organization. And PCRF isn't still duplicating the work of another organization. No other organization in the world is taking kids from the Middle East and arranging free medical care for them outside. No other organization in the world is sending volunteer teams in to identify areas where the children are waiting for care and treating them. So when we bring a team in from Italy who does open heart surgery, we have a list of kids waiting. They already have reviewed that list before they come. They come in the first day, they have a clinic, they see all those kids, and they operate for the rest of the week. We run every mission like that. No other organization is doing that, like PCRF. And what we're doing now, building cancer departments, building intensive care units, equipping ICUs and operating theaters in hospitals in Lebanon, for example, no other organization is doing that. So we're not actually duplicating. It's very important that we don't duplicate. That's the last thing we want to do, because resources are limited, they are scarce in general, but also in the health sector in particular. So if we see an area, we do a needs assessment and we ensure that whatever we're doing is not being duplicated by another organization, or that it's truly needed. We're not doing something that isn't really addressing a very clear and urgent need within the health sector. So there aren't any other organizations quite like PCRF in the area that we're working, which is a good thing, because there's so many organizations doing things themselves that no other organization is doing. And that we admire that, we respect that, and we support that. Whether it's in education, whether it's in social services for people, whatever it is, there's other organizations doing that work. What we're doing is truly unique on the ground there and not being duplicated by anybody else. Very important to not, because resources are so limited, you know. Any other questions? Yes, Lena.
What's the average stay of doctors or people who come to help? How long do they stay? And then do you face any hardship bringing them in, considering that there's occupation? Are they easily given permission to go into Palestine?
Yeah, so the first question, what's the average stay? These doctors take their vacation time. So it's amazing, because if you think, well, a lot of the doctors only have a few weeks a year vacation time, right? And if you're a Spanish doctor, you want to go spend it on the beach on the Mediterranean. They take that week away from their families, away from their work, and give it to us because most of the time their hospitals don't give them that time off paid. So the doctors usually come for a week for two reasons. One, it's their vacation time. And secondly, by the end of the week, the hospital's full of kids that they've treated. We have that problem all the time. We don't have space in the hospitals, and that's why we're building further capacity in pediatric cardiology and in the intensive care unit, because we lack space. So when a team comes in and does open heart surgeries for a week, by the end of the week we have no place to put kids. So it's not efficient for them to stay any longer. So the average stay is usually a week. Sometimes we've had doctors who are retired, but they still have the energy and the experience and the ability to come and stay longer. I remember I had a great friend of mine, I'm going to mention him, Dr. Alan Kerr from New Zealand. He was a pediatric cardiac surgeon who I first met in the year 2000, and he was at the end of his career, but he was really had so much energy. And at the end of your career, you have all of this knowledge and experience. Retirement for him was mandatory in New Zealand, but he still wanted to operate, and he still could operate. So we took him, and he stayed for months at a time. He would come and stay 3 months or 6 months, even in Gaza in 2004, 2005, when Gaza was being bombed in the Second Intifada. He was actually on the ground there living and operating on sick kids. In his life, many times there was explosions near his hotel and near where he was living or near the hospital. His life was at risk, but he was willing to put that, to endanger himself, because he had a higher purpose, which was helping our kids. Occasionally you get those kind of physicians, but for the most part, because they're still working and they're still in their hospitals active, they can only give a week at a time. Good second question. Is it hard for them to come in? There were periods where we've had our physicians stopped, but we have a pretty good system in place now. We coordinate before they come. They have letters of invitation from the Ministry of Health and from us. It's clear when they arrive that they're coming for humanitarian purposes, and they do come for humanitarian purposes. They're not involved in anything other than treating children on a humanitarian level. So in that sense, for the most part, they don't have problems. Sometimes doctors with Arab names have longer time sitting at the border, or they face a different kind of treatment than doctors who don't have Arab names. But in the last year or so, we've been able to get them in for the most part without too much trouble. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys for coming out. And again, I hope you all stay safe during this really difficult time. Thank you.